Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm Andrew Price, and today I'll be talking about preparing for a grid down situation. How can you keep yourself and your family safe and comfortable when the lights go out? Stick around. Catastrophic power outages can be caused by numerous factors. It could be a natural disaster, something like a hurricane, tornado, or earthquake bringing down the power grid, or it could be something like a coronal mass ejection from the sun, something that's often referred to as a Carrington-style event. Now, the effects of that are still disputed, but it's certainly something to bear in mind. Another factor would be terrorism, as we've seen recently in Germany, where a group set fire to several power stations and substations, and that caused widespread power outages lasting for several days. We also saw power outages in Spain last summer, where most of Spain and large areas of France and Portugal were without power for several weeks. Another factor is government overreach, and we're seeing this at the moment in Iran, where their government has shut down the power grid and the internet in order to control the population. So, there are lots of things that can affect your access to power, and most of them you have very little control over, but what you can control is the resilience of yourself and your family, and that's what I'll be talking about today. For those of you that live off-grid, you're probably already well versed in how much power you use and how much you need. But for those of us who are on the grid, we tend to use power without really thinking about it. So it's a good idea, before we go out and spend a lot of money on equipment, if we just sit down with a notepad and pen and really think about all the things that we use every day. And that should give us a pretty good idea of how much power we need in order to maintain a semblance of normality. Most power outages will be quite short-term in duration, maybe a few minutes, possibly a few hours. But the first thing you'll notice is when you go to switch on a room light, it doesn't come on. Which is why I've put light at the very top of my list. Now, the easiest way to get light wherever you look is to buy a head torch. Now, you can buy very cheap head torches, or you can buy quite expensive ones. I always suggest buying medium-priced, good quality head torches and getting multiples. 2 is 1, 1 is none, and 3 is a guarantee. So it's always a good idea to have at least 2 head torches. And if you do, buy one that's rechargeable and one that uses something like AAA or AA batteries. That way you've got options when the power's out. So 2 head torches, 3 ideal. I like to buy everyone head torches for Christmas. Just means I've got plenty of head torches around. Once you've got a head torch, everywhere you look is illuminated. Then you might want to think about getting a more powerful torch, something like this mag light. This is a D-cell, 2 D-cell mag light. A really good, reliable, high-quality torch, and because it's the modern version that uses LEDs, it means it's much more efficient than the old style of mag light as well. And you can get these up to 6 D-cell, and that means that they can be used as a sort of baton if you're that way inclined. So a really good option as well. And once you're in a room and you want to illuminate a room, as long as you've got a source of power to recharge, you can buy rechargeable lanterns like this one. This is the Robins Munro, which is an excellent design. Looks very traditional, quite retro, and you've got multiple light options with this. You've got a bright option, a dim sort of light reading light, quite efficient, a little bit of a white light, and a brighter light there. And you've got 4 different options there. Another option, a little bit cheaper, is an 80 watt. These are often marketed as a market light, or for sort of outdoor fetes and things like that. Not the nicest light, very white, bluish sort of colour, but you've got options. You've got a few dimming options, and you've also got a flashing option, which is great in an emergency to draw attention to where you are. So another good option, not particularly expensive. Those are our electrical options here. Whoa, steady on. And another one, if you have a portable power pack like this small one, which is great, it means you can charge your phone up wherever you go. And you can buy these very small lights here, which just plug into a USB fit-in. Let's get it the right way around. And these are incredibly efficient. So if you've got a few of these power packs, you can just put one of these in a room and it will illuminate the room just enough to stop you falling over the furniture. But if you hold it close, you can read by it. So a really useful, very efficient option. And these are quite inexpensive as well. So I like to have a load of these around, and you can plug them into a PC or anywhere that you've got USB fittings, and you'll get an illumination wherever you need it. Now, once we've got our electrical options covered, the next thing is a little bit old school, and I'm quite old school, and I like candles. So candles are great. They are not particularly expensive unless you get the really fancy scented ones, but normal pillar candles like this are great. You just put them in a candle holder and they'll provide light, but also they give a source of heat. So I like candles for that. Obviously, if we're using candles, there is a danger that will cause a fire. So if you're using a candle, you should always be in the same room and make sure that you've got fire blankets, fire extinguishers, and all the good sensible stuff that we should have as well. Another thing I really like is paraffin, premium paraffin. And that can be used for all sorts of lamps, like this square hand lamp here, which is from Petromax. And these are very efficient. They also provide a good amount of heat and a good amount of light. So you can read by them. They illuminate a room really well. They're quite traditional and they've been made for a very long time. So I always have a couple of these at least around the place. Same goes if you're using a lantern that uses fuel, there is a danger of fire. So make sure you're in the same room as it and that you have fire extinguishers, fire blankets, and also enough ventilation to make sure that you don't asphyxiate or die of carbon monoxide poisoning. When it comes to charging devices such as phones, maybe a head torch, you might want to consider a small portable power pack like this one. This is a Goal Zero Sherpa 100, which is a 25,000 milliamp hour power pack, and that would be ideal. You'd probably get 6 charges of your phone, things like that. So it'll keep you going for a few days. So a really useful item. I take one of these on camping trips. I've got another one that I keep in my vehicle. So they're very useful, very portable, and a good item, probably the first item you should buy to recharge. And once you've got one of those, you may start to think about longer term power emergencies, something for several days, several weeks potentially, and that's where a larger power pack or a power generator like this comes in. Now, I remember when, not that long ago, if you wanted to be off-grid, you had to buy a gel leisure battery, and it's a bit like a car battery, but designed for more cycles of charging and discharging. Now, they were very good, and you could incorporate them in a vehicle, in a van. You could use solar panels to recharge them, and they were very good, and they last for quite a long time. But in the most recent years, we're seeing far more of these. This is a lithium power pack. This particular one is the Vitoman Flash Speed 1500, and I've got this one as my home-based power pack. And essentially, these are a bank of power batteries with a built-in inverter and then multiple outputs as well. So if you look at the front of this one, you've got a series of 230 volt outputs here. So you can run things like standard house lights, you can plug in a computer, you can plug in a television, and you've also got the options of USB-A, which is the standard old style USB, and the USB-C, which is probably what most of our modern phones are recharged using. And right here you have a 12 volt, which is the sort of thing you find in vehicles, and you can run quite a few 12 volt appliances off that as well. So you've got a bank of different options here, and then under this hatch here, you've got the input. So this is where you can recharge either using the mains power when it comes back on, or you can recharge using a solar panel like this 220 watt panel here, which folds up, and it's quite portable, so you can take it on camping trips, or you can use it at home when the sun's out, which it's not today. I've also bought a booster battery, which extends the power so that I've got more power and I can recharge both of these, and it will last me probably several days, even several weeks when the power goes out. The next thing I'll be talking about is cooking, boiling water, things like that. Only a primitive savage would want to live for any length of time without tea or coffee, which is why it's quite high on my list of priorities. We've got a few options. There are numerous different types of stoves available. I'll talk about the ones that I use. This is a gas stove, uses disposable gas canisters. These are quite cheap, readily available from most outdoor suppliers. And this is the sort of thing a lot of people use for camping now. Great for emergencies. The gas canisters are fairly inexpensive. They use butane, and you can find these in lots of different retail outlets. Another one, and as I've said before, I'm quite old school and I like paraffin. So I use paraffin in my lamps. And I also have this vintage paraffin heater here, which is great for cooking. It can boil water. I can make stews on it, things like that. So it looks really cool. I like antique things, and this works as well as the day it was made. So it's probably 70, 80 years old, and it still works just as well as the day it was made. And that burns paraffin, premium paraffin, and it uses a wick, which are all still available now. Now, you may be in an old house, or you may have a wood-burning stove, as I do, and I've got easy access to firewood because I work in the woods. So having a wood stove means I can also use that for boiling water or cooking in an emergency. If the grid goes down during the winter, you're going to get pretty cold. So a good principle is to think about keeping the person warm rather than the room or the house. And on that basis, we might think about making sure that everyone in the house has decent clothing. So you could start with decent base layers, something made from merino wool, decent socks, woolly jumpers, fleece, things like that. I really like natural wool, so most of my warm layers are made of natural wool. Once you've got that sorted, you might want to get a decent wool blanket for every person in the family as well, and maybe a decent sleeping bag. So that way, everybody's got the ability to keep themselves warm no matter how cold it gets. Once you've done that, you may want to designate a part of the house as a warm room. And that means that rather than trying to heat the whole house, you can just focus all your attention on keeping one room warm. And that way everybody can stay in there, eat their meals, read, play board games. And it just means that it's a much more efficient way of keeping the people in the house warm rather than trying to keep the whole house warm. And there are several ways you might want to do that. If you live in an old house and you can have a wood-burning stove like the one behind me, that's a great option. And because I work in the woods, I get my firewood for free anyway. It's not an option for everyone. If you live in a city, you may have rules that prevent you from having a wood-burning stove, or if you live in a modern house, it may not be feasible. In which case, there are other options. One option is to use a gas heater, and that often uses butane or propane gas bottles. And these are portable, they can be taken anywhere, and they're not a bad option if you're using propane anyway. I'm a big fan of paraffin. It's quite old school, but premium paraffin is a really good fuel, and I always try to keep about 20 litres or so on standby. And I use it in lanterns, and I also use it in these heaters. And this particular one here is a vintage Aladdin blue flame heater. And this was made sometime in the 1950s or 1960s in Swansea, which is where I'm from. And the factory that made this is long gone, but this heater is still here and it's still working just as well as the day it was made. It's a fantastic item. You can still pick these up in flea markets, on Facebook Marketplace, eBay, places like that. They have gone up in price a lot. They've become a little bit collectible, but if you can find a good one, they're an excellent option. The same for this one here. This is a Valor, which is another make, long gone, but the heaters are still very, very good. So that's how you might heat one room of the house. Another option is to use candles, maybe put them in a jam jar. You've probably seen that technique where you can use tea light candles and a terracotta flower pot. It might look good in theory, but the reality is burning a tea light candle gives the same amount of heat whether it's in a jam jar or underneath a terracotta pot. So it might look good, but you're still going to get the same amount of heat. But definitely a good option. As I've said before, if you are using any form of naked flame, as these have, it's a really good idea to make sure that you have fire blankets, a carbon monoxide detector, good ventilation, and a fire extinguisher. And make sure you always stay in the same room so you can keep an eye on them. If the duration of a power outage is a few hours, then the contents of your refrigerator and your freezer are probably okay. But if it goes on much beyond that, those are the first things you want to be eating. And once you've got rid of all those perishable goods, then you want to have a good supply of non-perishable foods, canned foods, packet foods, things like long life milk. But the important thing to consider with all of these is that they don't require a lot of energy to cook. So things like canned beans, you just need to warm them up, or in an emergency, you can just eat them cold. So think about that. You don't want to be having things that take a long time to cook. Most commercial water treatment plants do have backup power, but if the emergency goes on for a long period of time, the chances are the water may stop coming out of the tap. And if that happens, you've got real problems, which is why it's always a good idea to stock up on water. I always keep working on the basis of about 3 litres per person per day. I try to keep at least a week's worth of water on hand. And you might also want to consider getting a water filter and having some sort of means of collecting water, maybe a water butt that collects water from your roof. And that will extend the amount of time you can be off-grid. One of the biggest takeaways from the power outage that happened in Spain last summer was how quickly everything fell apart. And one of the first things to go down was the ability to pay for goods and services. So if you went into a store to buy your groceries, you couldn't pay on a card. And that meant the only thing you could buy anything with was cash. And unfortunately, most of the cash machines weren't working either. So that meant unless you had cash on hand, you couldn't get anything. So it's a good idea. Keep some cash on hand, just enough to buy a few days worth of groceries, get yourself out of trouble. And also don't keep it all in large notes. Make sure you've got some small change as well. That way you can buy those small items without having to hand over an entire £20 or $20 note. We live in a time where people's attention spans are very short and entertainment is expected at the push of a button. But in the event of a power outage, there's a good chance we'll be going back in time, in the sense that we have to amuse ourselves. So it's a good idea to make sure you've got some board games, some good books, and something to keep the kids amused. Otherwise, you're going to have a revolution on your hands. So just for the sake of morale, make sure you've got lots of things to keep yourself busy and amused until the power comes back on. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. Do you agree with everything I've said? Or are you wrong? Just kidding. Do comment down below. What would you put in your grid down kit? Would you keep many of the same items that I have, or would you exchange them for other options? I'd like to know. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our weekly content, which is uploaded at 1 PM UK time every Saturday. I'll see you next time.